Well, hey, good afternoon. It is the Lord's Day, and this is Pastor Matt coming to you again with another book review. This time not a Bible, but one that has nevertheless a great history and significance in the world of theology, as well as the development of the modern English language. Of course, I'm talking about the Book of Common Prayer, which we see right here. Now, I was raised in the Lutheran Church before moving into the non-denominational world and then eventually into Presbyterianism. So I do have some history with liturgy and liturgical worship, not as much as my Anglican brothers and sisters, from whence this great book comes, the Book of Common Prayer, a book that developed out of the mid-1500s in the Reformation, compiled by Thomas Cranmer, who was eventually martyred, being burned at the stake as a Protestant. So, this is a very interesting book. Let me tell you a little bit about it, and then we'll examine the contents. First of all, this is the larger size Book of Common Prayer. Cambridge University Press makes this, and they do have a smaller one. This would be the large print edition, and it is hand-sized at just about 7 by 5, and this is the French Morocco edition, black leather cover. Not the highest grain leather you can find, not the highest premium, like a goat skin or a calf skin, but nevertheless a good black Morocco leather. So what is the Book of Common Prayer? Well, let's talk about it just for a few moments. First of all, the Book of Common Prayer has changed over the years. This is the 1662 edition, so it would be one of the least altered books of Common Prayer. But today in the Episcopal Church, they use a version of the Common Prayer book. Here in the United States has been significantly modified, and I would say expanded from this, the closer to the original edition from way back in the mid-1600s in the era of the Puritans. And so this book contains orders of worship for both public and private use. Of course, you will find a liturgy for the Lord's Day, and especially for the communion service. You will find that. You will also find an entire edition of the Psalter in not the King James, as you might think, but the Coverdale translation, one of the earlier English translations. So the Psalter here included in the Book of Common Prayer has a very old worldly feel to it. It has some other services for public worship, such as the baptism of infants. And of course you have what are called collects and readings for every Lord's Day of the year, including the holy days, like Trinity Sunday, like Easter, like the day of Pentecost, or Whitsunday, as it was called in the older world. And then very early on in the book, you have several orders of prayer for public worship or for private use. There are two orders of prayer. One is called morning prayer, and the other is evening prayer. And these contain some of the great ancient prayers, such as the prayer of St. Chrysostom, such as the Great Litany, which is a wonderful prayer for anybody to pray either publicly or privately as an individual Christian. And then, of course, the Book of Common Prayer has an entire table of readings for you to do your devotions. So, what can we say about this book? Well, it is extremely helpful for the individual Christian who wants to learn how to pray better as a Christian. What are you going to get if you work through the morning prayer, for instance? Well, you'll start off with a couple of scripture sentences that set the mood for the worship time of the believer. That would be contained right here, these opening sentences. And then you have an extended period of confession, where if you're doing this corporately, there would be an invitation to move into a time of confession, followed by a prayer that could be said aloud by those gathered, or simply by the individual praying by himself, an absolution, or the receiving of forgiveness. And then you would move into the Lord's Prayer and the Gloria Patri, which you probably may sing in your church from time to time. And then you'll come into what was a little bit unusual for me as a Presbyterian. They have what are called the Canticles, which are songs, but don't be afraid of these canticles. Several of them are just extended passages of Scripture. For instance, the Venite is an invitation to come and worship from Psalm 95. Here it is right here. You have the Te Deum Laudamus, which is to God we give praise, a wonderful prayer, an ancient prayer used by Christians for many years. And then you will read your passages from the order. For instance, here's the passage from the New Testament, and then you go back to your table and you find the passage that you're supposed to read for both morning and evening. And then it concludes with other collects and closing prayers. The collects are rather interesting. Every Lord's Day of the year has its own prayer that you pray weekly. Here I just opened to the one for this week. This is the fourth. No, I'm sorry, this is Lent. This is the fourth Sunday after Epiphany. But nevertheless, you find the collect for the week, and then you have weekly passages as well. So this is a great book that you can use to guide your private prayer life, or if you're an Anglican or Episcopalian, you probably know this book very well already. Well, if you're struggling to find a way to do your devotions, maybe go to the ancient path and do what believers all around the world are doing and using the Book of Common Prayer to guide you and to select your scripture passages for you for both morning and evening prayer. Okay? If you're interested in the Book of Common Prayer, you can hit the link in the description of this video, and I will post a direct link to Amazon where you can find this exact edition of the Book of Common Prayer by Cambridge Press in the French black Morocco leather. I will note that there are other prayer books out there. Many of them are very good. The later they are, of course, the more recent, the more modified they're going to be. More liberal language is going to come in there. More options or alternate worship services. I think that's kind of the key language, is alternate worship services. I prefer the traditional stuff, the original stuff, and you cannot really go wrong with this book coming out of the Reformation, written and compiled by a martyr, a Protestant martyr, Thomas Cranmer. Okay? Well, thanks for checking in. Have a great day.